Sometimes, when the creative process seems to be at a low ebb, you can reflect back to things you've done in the past. Just rework them into your current situation. You might recall this production idea from my early WJNO days.
Today, WHAS celebrates 50 years of continuing Kentuckiana service. And now, here to recap some of those earlier years, your host, Jim Walton.
Thomas Edison had begun it all by discovering the vacuum tube. Marconi, since 1895, had been dabbling with wireless transmission, and rumors began. In 1917, Henry Deal, an obscure Louisville City Hall draftsman, told Pleasant Brooks that the day would come when the world could hear his baritone. Mrs. Brooks says he described not only radio transmission, but forecast television. And then in 1920, Pittsburgh listeners picked up first radio station broadcasts from KDKA. By the following year, crystal detectors had become a national rage, and at the time our story opens in 1922, the country was mumbling of dynamos, voltmeters, variometers, choke coils, and variable resistance. Radio sets were being incorporated into rings, necklaces, and cigar boxes. July 1922. On the 2nd of July, 5th Avenue buses in New York were equipped with overhead antennae for convenience of passengers who couldn't wait to get home to listen. The Lackawanna Railroad was preparing to install earphones in the berths. It was estimated that there were already 19,000 stations in this country, 15,000 of them amateur, 348 experimental, 2,783 on ships, 439 commercial. The National Geographic magazine figured that distances from now on would be measured not in miles, but in knob turns. Colleges were preparing to introduce courses. $5 million a week was being spent on radio equipment, which in 3 years had increased several thousand%. Recruiting was being stimulated by it. Populace ducked in and between swims at the beach to listen to the ether, and inventors were claiming contact with the spirit world. Headphones clamped to ears of patients were being used to prevent discomfort during operations. In Texas, a wedding ceremony was performed by the minister, bride, and bridegroom at 3 different stations. By 1922, KDKA was broadcasting regularly from a tent on top of a Pittsburgh building, sending out regular concerts, news, church services, and static. In Detroit, WWJW tossed an antenna out of a 5th-story window, tied it to a rock in the alley, and fretted because its signals came out queer. They were still in a tizzy when Judge Bingham got the idea of a radio station for Louisville. April 22nd. Judge Bingham, owner of the Courier-Journal, called on Credo Harris. Credo, he said, "I want you to put a radio station on the air for me," or words to that effect. Well, Credo and Emmett Graft visited WWJW, found them biting their nails, but learned how to set up a station. A license awarded by Herbert Hoover, Secretary of Commerce. And why WHAS? Nobody knows. But Judge Bingham knew what he wanted of his radio station. When WHAS received its license, the judge said, "I want a radio station which will reach into the farthest confines of the state, where a man may string an aerial from his cabin to the nearest pine tree and, sitting before the fire in his chair, have a pew in a church, a seat at the opera, a desk at the university." Basically, the judge wanted the operation of WHAS to reflect a concern for the interest of the listeners and for the region which WHAS reached. The new station was built in space acquired from the Fireproof Storage Company. It consisted of 5 rooms, a reception room, studio, manager's office, engineer, and generator. The walls were pale cream, the woodwork apple green, pale gray rugs, drapes at casement windows, wicker furniture upholstered in bright cretonne, a grand piano at one end, an organ at the other, and the microphone size and shape of an alarm clock. Guests were scared to death to touch metal in the studio. Nobody knew at that time what would happen. Credo Harris, meanwhile, was busy sending out letters to university upon university, musical societies, public characters, prominent individuals of Kentucky and southern Indiana, and many queued up for auditions. One couple in their 70s appeared to sing. Saturday, July 15th, 1922. 2 antennae, 60-foot towers, were raised on the roof of the Courier-Journal building, and practice tests made, phonograph and piano concert. 100 calls reported that it was loudest, clearest program they'd ever heard. William Tapp of Upper River Road, using a 25-foot clothesline for antenna, said the program was loud and distinct. Sunday, July 16th. Marconi, in an interview quoted in the Courier-Journal, foresaw a great university of the air. A warning voice, he predicted, would clear the ether of all chatter, making way for the great ones of humanity, science, authors, artists, who would lecture for some great central institution to classes of 20 million people. Monday, July 17th. Sizzling weather, unnoticed by fans raiding electric shops for last-minute equipment. One woman, electrically uninformed, constructed a set from directions printed in the newspaper. She said she heard the second practice concert just fine. Tuesday, July 18, 7:20 p.m. 10 minutes to airtime. Emmett Graff got the last bug out of the equipment. Down on the streets, the fans were clustering in mobs in front of loudspeakers poking out of electric shops. 150 people in the crowd in front of Taffel Electric Company. 500 in a theater in Eminence, Kentucky. One man said, "I'm 70, but I never believed I'd live to hear such things come from the air." July 18, 1922, 7:30 p.m. The red light went on and Credo Harris announced, "This is WHAS, the radio telephone broadcasting station of the Courier-Journal and the Louisville Times in Louisville, Kentucky." Reaction to the first broadcasts were generally enthusiastic, but not always. Subsequent natural disasters were blamed on radio waves. One critic complained that her child throwed up in school, blamed disturbance of the ether. Another said bricks fell out of his chimney. One woman sat up for 40 hours, couldn't stand the electricity in her bed springs and queer noises in the fireplace. One woman visited the studio hoping to make contact with her late husband. One farmer came in, accused Credo of commuting with the devil, said a blackbird had dropped out of a flock passing overhead, dead, said it might have been me. September 14, WHAS first to make a special test broadcasting to a moving train. Louisville and Nashville Railroad picked up the program in a tunnel under Muldraw Hill. In the fall of 1922, Credo, busier than a one-armed paper hanger, visiting schools throughout Kentucky, urging them to get together money for radios, visioning huge educational opportunity and widespread broadcasting to the classrooms. July 18th. The first weather report broadcast at the end of the opening program. And these weather reports later were to save farmers millions of dollars, repay radio costs many times over. Due to unfathomable federal ruling, stations broadcast at 360 on the dial, but weather had to be given at 485. This caused frantic adjustments of sets. Usually, by the time the farmer got the new channel, the station was back on 360. This rule was changed due to urgent pleading by the Louisville Weather Bureau. Religion, July 19. On his way to the studio, Credo Harris saw a church bulletin board with the legend, "God is always broadcasting." It gave him the idea for establishing regular church services, already begun by some other stations. Sports for 1922. July 19th, 4 p.m., the first baseball scores broadcast. October 4th, WHAS, first baseball game broadcast, the World Series, compiled from INS reports by wire. October 21st, the first football game. Center, versus Harvard. Music in 1922. Music was the backbone of the station from the start. During the first 3 months, the station gave 82 afternoon concerts, 82 evening concerts, 12 Sunday afternoon sacred recitals, 1,610 entertainers, many repeat performances by the same soloists, of course. The actual count of repeats was not kept at that time. July 22nd, 1922, Saturday night. Following the regular program, Charles Meyer's dance orchestra moved into the station from the country club, while a mobile unit rigged up to advertise WHAS pinch hit for the dancers at the club, reproducing music from the studio. Up till then, it had been thought that drums, bass files, could not be reproduced by radio. WHAS was first to introduce clavichord to the air. Helen Mitchell in costume played it with a mic inside the instrument. Other programs carried music from jugs, carpenter's saws, zithers, and French harps. Whistlers enjoyed a streak of popularity. December 1922. The first remote pickup was of the Alamo Theater organ. October 31st, 1922, in the news. Vice President Calvin Coolidge spoke. He was supposed to take 15 minutes. He spoke 6. Thomas R. Marshall and Ida M. Tarbell also addressed the WHAS audiences. Ida M. Tarbell described it as the greatest scare I ever had in my life. In 1922, WHAS started cooperating with police in the location of criminals. They also established a Bureau of Missing Persons. WHAS 1923. By January 1st, WHAS had reached Spanish Honduras, Sydney, Nova Scotia, and Hudson's Bay. 30,000 letters had been received from its fans, and WHAS ranked as one of the 6 foremost stations in the United States. It had given 3,006 performances, had reunited 17 missing persons to their families, one of them 2 minutes after the first announcement on the air. 1-tube battery sets still were in general use. Engineers were still fretting over body capacity. Fans who called up to say their apparatus had gone bad were told to wiggle their cat whiskers, dash crystal with rubbing alcohol, or bake in the oven for 10 minutes. The first anniversary, July 18, 1923. The station had received 64,000 letters, estimated listeners at 3,200,000, and had been heard in Labrador and the Azores. The anniversary was marked by receipt of a letter claiming that there was a blind spot 90 miles from Louisville. Station manager Credo Harris sent an engineer to investigate and verify the report. No WHAS. July 21st. Credo Harris instructed technicians to attempt to pick up a radio signal from underground in Mammoth Cave. The engineers took a guide with him, tried 3 times. The first spot was too wet, the second too dry. And at the last moment, they got results on the 3rd try. This was the first broadcast which proved radio waves traveled through the earth. WHAS 1924, March 20th. WHAS instituted the first out-of-town pickup. Credo Harris at the Brown Hotel talking long distance with Mary Pickford in New York. Also in March, WHAS started a radio farm school, which was welcomed by the farmers, by teachers, colleges, and agents. August 22nd, 1924, BOW. That's before Orson Welles.